This is something I wrote maybe just a couple years ago, and I was out at the Golden Gate Bridge on the beach, and I was trying to walk around the base of it on this side, and I almost got arrested for trying to do that. It's called Fort Pointless and the Golden Gate of False Alarm. I was walking on the beach and feeling so relaxed. The pelicans were floating overhead. It's like the facts of life are flying in formation and their shadows move along the bridge. I'm at the foot of it and in the mood to go around it, but there is a sign. It says no trespassing. Qu'est-ce que c'est? I went there anyway, and it was passing strange. The tower started talking with a human voice, saying, "You on the beach, don't move." Sometimes you have a choice. You can run when the authorities have you in their sights, or you can be polite and hopefully not spend the night in jail. A man in combat gear appeared. From what I hear, an M16 is not so friendly. Governing with fear is how the administration works. The man went through my bag. He's looking for explosives. This is much ado about nothing, and he mentioned 9/11. I nearly said it was an inside job. I didn't want to lose my head or get my camera confiscated lining up a shot of him and a suspension bridge. But things can be forgotten when they're not on film. Another soldier with a gun appeared, protecting us from surfers and the setting sun. I said I work for an attorney, criminal defense. He thought that was amusing, but it still was kind of tense. I pointed out the windsurfers who were not so far away. He said I shouldn't argue, and no matter what I say, I didn't have a legal leg to stand on. And what's more, the surfers get arrested if they ever come ashore. He noticed someone down the beach, a man without any clothes, and said it was illegal. I'm illegal, I suppose, whenever I go swimming, but my weapons are revealed. They're capable of procreation. A magnetic field of paranoia, it is polarizing everyone and getting on my nerves, and we are living under the gun. Security is overblown. Reminds me of Fort Point beneath the bridge. It never fired a shot. It is Fort Pointless. And the Golden Gate of false alarm with gun emplacements from a century ago and never used. I'm spacing out. He's checking my ID. They know where I live, no lie. He talks into his collar mic. I look into the sky to see who he is talking to. It was a military helicopter. This is not a very literary moment. But the government can put your life on hold, and 9/11 is not the greatest story ever told. The side effects of this regime, we feel them on the West Coast, but they let me go. It's like it was an ID test. I'm walking down the beach, although the helicopter followed for a while. I'm thinking if you wanted to explode a package on the bridge, you want it closer to the road, and not 200 feet below the toll booth. But what do I know? The sun is getting low. The beach is practically deserted, though a seal has stuck his head up. It is disconcerting when you're flushing out the M16s, the iron fist inside a democratic glove. But I'm a realist. I like the engineering, but I want to know what's hiding underneath the bridge. If I was such a law-abiding citizen, I'd have to settle for a limited perspective. There's a word for that. It's called inhibited. I took my clothes off, and I dove into the nearest wave. It's warmer than the government, whose power is depraved. I'm swimming in the ocean. I don't want to be arrested. And considering the week I've had, a double-breasted mermaid who can speak in many tongues, including mine, would not surprise me. Or a poem ending with this line. I think they're still out there, as far as I know. They're automatic weapons. also something that occurred. I was on the 49 bus one evening called Streetcar Named Divorce. The passengers got in the bus. The door closed, and a second later a fist hit the door. It left a spider's web of cracks embedded in the glass and caused a woman to hurry to the back of the bus in tears, exclaiming to a lot of strangers that it was her ex-boyfriend, and she was afraid of him. Apparently a caveman who would knock her on the head and drag her to his condo. She was shaking in the back of the bus, and at the front the lights of a police car were revolving. Having been across the street, they saw the incident, accelerated to a head-on confrontation with the bus, and had the perpetrator on the ground and handcuffed in a matter of seconds. All of this unfolding for the passengers who are wondering what's going on. 11:30 on a Thursday night. I want to say it was a streetcar named Desire, but it was a run-down minibus, a bucket of bolts and bone-disturbing jolts. A man with a gun is on the bus and walking to the back, encountering a panic-stricken woman, asking her to talk about it on the sidewalk, and assuring her the boyfriend is in cuffs and locked inside a black and white. So she is stepping off the bus, and we are still not going anywhere. The passengers have suddenly become irrelevant. The situation redefined, and this is not a bus anymore. It is a sacred crime scene with reporters bringing candles. And I had to walk up to the front and ask the driver if we would be moving, and he told me no. The window in the door had crystallized, and that required an investigation by municipal authorities, and everybody had to leave. So we are walking past a sullen suspect in the back of a police car, like a Romeopathic moron, or a baby who is smashing things if he is moody. He's in need of a restraining order, maybe even manual labor in a re-education camp. At the moment he is married to the state. He'll spend the night in jail. It's going to cost a lot. You have to wonder if he would have bothered if he hadn't been in love. Or maybe this is showing that his love was just a power trip. If breaking windows is illogical and primitive, it has a lot in common with the love affair. He lost it, and he takes it out on her. They're in their early 30s. Maybe he's a mama's boy who always got what he wanted, and he falls in love with a mechanical determination, which is not exactly flexible. And maybe she is gravitating in and out of love on more ephemeral terms, the way that women are said to be more fluid in their sexual orientation. Maybe she had fallen for the man because he was so solid and she wasn't, having doubts and insecurities, or he was leaning on a certain logic. When a woman turns to smoke and leaves him empty-handed, it is violating the laws of continuity as he has known them. So it's not surprising if he breaks the law when he is abandoned by a blonde. The pain of being rejected. Or a woman is more likely to internalize it, meaning she's less likely to end up in prison. And a man externalizes it to the point of smashing windows with a fist. And now he's praying, so to speak. His hands are locked together, and he's back on solid ground. It comes with iron bars he can depend on. He is counting on the continuity of prison time. The men arrest a man who's one of them in some respects, except he is a man gone wild, and they will shoot him if they have to. I am walking away and waiting for another bus in front of the Opera House, where I can hear the echoes of so many love affairs that fell apart. A lot of material riding the bus. This is fairly recent. It's about for the Libyan pilot who refused to bomb his own people. It occurred not too long ago. Called Bailout, or the people are too big to fail. A pilot has ejected. He rejected the regime. He's floating in the air. A parachute protecting him. It's downright paranormal. and his fighter jet is going on without him. He is bailed out of the war machine and hangs suspended by his principles a mile above the ground. A parachute is fragile as a flower or a cloud, but it supports a man. It's focused on the human. It's a Renaissance parachute. The lines are like a poem which can save your life. The old regime is losing its grip. It's showing what it's all about when pilots have been told to bomb their countrymen, to cut them into pieces on the ground. The pilot is responding to a higher authority. Instead of dropping a bomb, he drops himself. There's another way to join the crowd. Instead of acting like a robot in a cockpit, he is landing like a man and walks away. His fighter jet will burn out in the desert like a cigarette in a bowl of sand. George Long is not here, is he?
No.
This is a poem for George Long, called An Outspoken Saxophone. As many or most of you know, George plays with poets, in and around the poets, sometimes. When the reading ends, he signs it with a saxophonic flourish of abstract expressionism, having absorbed the mental cruelties, contortions, and chaotic controls of many sentient beings and experimental spirits. It's enough to make a saxophone operator scream. The readers have been shadowed by a reed instrument of redirected readiness, an infrared fraternity of writers horning in on inspiration, blowing hot air solos in their own right through a mortal mouthpiece. A musician sums it up with an echo of erratic high and low points that were thrown out by the poets, whose cogito ergo sum is stretching into cogitating ergonomic summaries. And you could say your mind is blowing in the wind, and we are made of air. A man inhales, and then a whole note walks into the room. It's filling with holistic rumors and rapid note movement. There's a passing reference to the sonic customs of another country. All of it is falling from a horn of plenty. It is satirizing and distilling any incidental sounds on Broadway, from a stripper slipping off a veil to someone slamming on the brakes. It is a motorcycle saxophone, a sex addiction saxophone, revealing the free-thinking instrumental limits of existence with a manual dexterity. He's playing with his fingerprints, with whorls and arches made of sound. If he is using sheet music, it is nothing but a poem on a music stand, a composition in the key of Unlock It. When the justice in this town is out of whack, he weighs the options on a musical scale. He's looking for some balance, a blue rondo a la Turk, whatever works. When he hits the most disparate notes, you get a contact high, and it reverberates your being from your belly to your head. A riff as convoluted as the lower intestine, and a slow note leaves a flame on your head, a sonic synapse. It's a saxophone on fire, and the windblown flames aren't taking any names. The flames are made of sound. There's a furious conflagration, and he stands his ground. Thank you. I think he has heard that, or I gave it to him a while back. This is, I am mixing it up a little bit here in terms of older and newer things. This is definitely old. This is a piece I wrote for Bob Kaufman when he died. And Jack Hirschman here put together an anthology in honor of Bob Kaufman and put this poem in it. And this is back in 86. Maybe 87.
I have to say, it wasn't Jack Hirschman, it was the Bob Kaufman Collective.
The collective. I was just going through him. He was part of it.
He was a member.
He was a member, that's right. But it was, yeah, the collective, and it was a very nice book. It's called Bob Kaufman. Cut across country in the categories, and you stumble on some stories. They're compressed into a coded monologue. Nerve endings in his brain were bouncing it around. The impulse of communication and a spark gap. The delivery was a little shredded. I used to see him walking on whatever sidewalk was available. It seemed like he was listening to a voice, a nervous twitch, and something kept the fingers moving, a frenetic inner bop, and looking like a burnout. He had undergone shock treatment. The electrocuted poet who had gotten up and walked away and gone on walking like the man they couldn't hang. He was on another wavelength, where it wasn't necessary to communicate. He had sunk into an absolute existence, with the cheap hotel rooms passing like so many cloud formations, like a holy man who was immersed in being silent, finding there an absolute, a way of life, a constant, and a power which a lot of others find disturbing. I have tried it on occasion, not responding to a question, and as eloquent as the night itself, which may have taken over his location and locution, wired in his journey through the 20th century torque. Having come from 1925, his loneliness was crowded with some glowing scenes, and if it seemed that he was off the wall, it was a far imagined wall. A few years after I became aware that he existed with his life, a monumental commitment and refusal, it turned out he was coming back to life as we know it. One hot morning, Gregory Corso introduced me to him, and I bought him a drink. It was the least I could do for someone who makes you think, like brothers in a paralyzing vodka of the paranormal, still unscrewing the bolts in our security-conscious coffin. A man who was married to the volts and carried away by language to the origin of its worth. The insulation on the meanings torn away by those blue nocturnes of the void. Part 2. Cosmic alienation under foreign management, approximately nervous. Kinetic anonymity, united fatalism, mutter another noun. Kissing atmospheric undulation, feeling manifested Aries knowledge. Contacting airy unconditional fortune, moving around nirvana. Coffee, amphetamine, uncompromising future man about noon. Calamity, amorphous undercurrent, forging music and news. Combination, acclimated, ultra-flute, maniacal anthropology now. Thank you. Shall I explain that last part? No. It was riffing out the letters in the last name. It's about the Metropolitan Museum in New York, called Erotic Undercurrents in the Met. The Metropolitan Museum is a museum of sex. You go from room to room and don't know what will happen next. The naked men are posing with their ancient testicles. The naked women acting like they are receptacles. A happy satyr on a vase is sporting an erection. A wooden statue with torpedo tits, and a selection of the natural and underlying theme in here, if not a rule of thumb. I'm looking at a lifelike rear end with the organ missing, knocked off by the superstitious early Christians who were looking for a souvenir of classical proportions or a physical permission, while a woman is contorted by the subtle rhythms moving through her. There are women who will take you with them, though they lived in India 800 years ago. The men were fantasizing even then. But what do I know? And what happens if the statues come to life? It means you are succumbing to the anthropomorphic, not machines. And there are echoes of the human in Italian stone. It's fossilizing the idealized. We're made of bone and skin and sex, and being mortal leaves you in suspense. And the museum is suggesting that you drop your pants. I would be careful though, if you are feeling amorous around a statue made of marble. Feelings are amorphous, and a man could hurt himself and even feel rejected by a blank look or a 1,000-year stare. A misdirected familiarity with something which can't even hear you. So it is a standoff while Diana and a deer endure another day in a museum full of eyes. The humanism valid, it will cut you down to size, emerging in broad daylight with the person that you came with, a container of the ordinary and the mythic. This is technically a song, but I can read the words as you know. It's called One Foot in the Grave. A soldier is expendable and only 21, although he's feeling older with the shell shock and a gun. He has to follow orders and he's treated like a slave. He goes into a firefight with 1 foot in the grave. When you're getting old, it's like you are invisible. Insurance going through the roof, it's inadvisable. Women look right through you now. How should I behave? I'm feeling like some kind of ghost with 1 foot in the grave. The woman is addicted, she is constantly depressed. No matter what a man is doing, she is not impressed. The alcohol is getting to her, some cannot be saved. For most of her life, the woman has had 1 foot in the grave. The way some people drive around at 90 miles an hour, a near-death experience, but they like to feel the power. Now there is a lot of wreckage in the home of the brave, where some have 1 foot on the gas and 1 foot in the grave. The hobos and the homeless, they are sleeping on the ground, as if they're giving up the ghost, although they get around and ride the rails, they're not all there and moving in a daze. They get a leg up on a freight with 1 foot in the grave. If you're an existentialist, it means you can't assume you'll be around tomorrow, so you're sitting in a room and counting off the minutes. They're coming like a wave, the footage of infinity with 1 foot in the grave. The prophet went around the country talking to the poor until the men in power couldn't take it anymore, accusing him of profiteering and living in a cave. They nailed him to a telephone pole with 1 foot in the grave. A spider web and vapor trail are floating in the air, and when a man is lost in thought, he is barely there. His feet are on the ground, however, like they're made of clay, and those who living close to the earth have 1 foot in the grave.
Woo-hoo.
This reading may not have a happy ending, actually. Depending on what happens, I think, yeah, this should probably be the last one. And it's called September 11, 2001, and it's dedicated to those who believe that 9/11 was an inside job. September 11. It is an IQ test. Believing the official story of 9/11 takes an IQ of room temperature. A gullibility that P.T. Barnum would have loved to play with and which H.L. Mencken had no time for. Your psychological relationship to the facts of life is being tested. Similar to what we went through with Copernicus and Galileo, the authorities didn't think that we could handle it, the Earth not being the center of the universe. They wanted to control the information on a less than scientific basis. Your citizenship is being tested. Many people who are intelligent have gone along with the official story, like a radio broadcast of War of the Worlds in 1938. They don't have time to look into it, do some research, like informed citizens who judge accordingly. Some people say it can't happen here, and yet they never heard of Building 7. How is that an informed response? It is a knee-jerk psychological dismissal of conclusions that are too disturbing to consider. But for many that includes the possibility that there is no heaven. It would help the country if the citizens were not in the dark, if they dispelled the cloud of ash and obfuscation and toxicity that came from 9/11. It's a test of the emergency broadcast system. It can test the reflex of a humanoid on medication. It's a test of those who are living in denial in a fake democracy. It is testing what you know about the melting point of steel and stand-down orders, crash debris and NORAD, the removal of evidence from a crime scene, and Israeli spies applauding the collapse. It is a test of an investigative reflex in a freedom-loving country. There's a grassroots movement growing from the ashes of September 11, which were blown by an emergency broadcast system coast to coast, and the entire population was affected by the fallout. And some people want an explanation which is free of any conflict of interest. And the living owe it to those who died to focus on the clues in their remains. It's not a pretty sight, but don't avert your eyes. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance, resulting in a 1,000-yard stare for some of us. But the official story, a mirage. A million eyes are looking into 9/11. The official story is disintegrating, dust to dust. It is testing many on the left who won't go there, reluctant to admit that the extremists on the right were so successful and in touch with mass psychology. The working class was on their side. But a lot more blacks believe that 9/11 was an inside job. They know the white man is destructive. It's a memory test. The recollection of the wreckage is receding in a numbing distance. Hard to believe it was 9 years and several girlfriends ago. 2 jobs and 1 long interlude of unemployment. There's a photo of a woman standing in a gaping hole the plane had made and looking down. The building was cooling off. She would have survived if the explosions hadn't pulled the floor from under her a few minutes later. The neocons and the administration rode this specter of controlled demolition into history. It's like a hydroelectric dam. The power generated by those falling forces was enough to keep them in power for years.